I want to take a little time to talk to you a little bit about the Mourner card from this deck that I'm currently using. As you may or may not know, I collect tarot and oracle decks, and I am still what I would consider very new at doing readings. It's probably been about a year now, but I do readings more in the spirit of using them as opportunities for opening up a discussion within yourself or among your close friends about what the cards revealed, not necessarily as a magical fortune-telling kind of experience. But I do want to talk about, even outside of the idea of like tarot decks and oracle decks and things like that, I want to talk about, like I said, this card, the Mourner card from the deck I'm currently studying a little more deeply, which is the Egyptian Book of the Dead Oracle deck. It's a book very much based on the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Highly recommend you attempt to read the Book of the Dead. I personally was not able to make it through that book. It was too difficult for me to navigate intellectually, things like that. But the Mourner card is interesting just as a standalone thing to think about, because it's a card that's very much all about grief, loss, the sorrow that you go through when you are dealing with grief. And of course, this does not have to be grief about literally losing someone to death. It doesn't have to be that cut and dry. And this is where this particular card calls to me, because I'm a member of the chronic illness community. I'm a member of the LGBT community. I'm a member of the autistic community. I'm a member of many of these communities that unfortunately know all too well about sorrow and grief in different forms and loss. And it's not always loss of a person or a loss of a soul that is special to you. There are so many different kinds of loss. For the Egyptians in particular, loss was always a very important thing to acknowledge, and the mourning process was often considered an art in itself. I believe even in modern day Egypt, the official mourning period is 40 days long still. And so if we were doing a reading and this particular card came up in your spread, it would be very much about the same things we could talk about even if we didn't have this particular card to reference, and that is bereavement, that is grief. And the card coming up in your spread wouldn't even necessarily indicate, again, loss of a person, loss of a relationship, loss of the previous understanding of your identity, if you are talking about somebody in the queer community, or maybe somebody in the autistic community who has recently gotten their diagnosis. Loss of the person you used to be when you, like the chronic illness community, when you experience health issues or you experience a change in who you are as a person because of a medical condition or a medical event, whether it's a one-time event or it's going to be a long-term incurable struggle. It doesn't matter. But the Mourner card is good for opening up discussion about that, because it is easy to forget that loss isn't just about souls. The mourning period that the Egyptians took so seriously very much included coming to terms with the liminality of life, and that is, hi buddy, and that liminality looks like before and after, in the sense that, okay, so if it is the loss of a person, if someone literally dies, you have life before when they were still with you, and you have life after. When you get into more complex forms of mourning that aren't connected to just one event and one soul, you might have to mourn the person you were before your medical event, or the person you were before you became a sufferer of a chronic illness, things like that, to get to a period where you can move forward in perhaps a healthier way. It's all about coming to terms with a new reality, and sometimes it's not a reality that we were looking forward to, essentially. Just because it's not a reality we were looking for or a reality we want does not mean it's not our reality, though. And so an important part of moving forward and moving on is going through that mourning period. And, you know, the Egyptians, they recognize that so much that you find oracle decks and tarot decks with these Egyptian themes, and they acknowledge things like this. You know, they bring in the Mourner card and they use those tools. It's important to keep that in mind. And I wanted to share a quote from the book that accompanies this particular oracle deck that I have, because it felt really on point, and I think there are people that need to hear it other than myself. And it's absolutely true and brilliant and important to think about, whether you're into tarot decks or oracle decks or that kind of thinking at all. Bear in mind that the universe hates a void. So if something has been lost to you, then something else will come along to fill that void. And that particular part is in the section that addresses this Mourner card. And I thought it was important to share that with you because that is such an important thing to think about and realize and accept. And it can make the mourning period of whatever loss you're going through easier, I believe. Because at the end of the day, it's a reminder that mourning is just a small period in a larger life. It's a phase of sorts. And if we're patient and we work through that and we try to have just a little faith, not necessarily in a God or a higher power, but just in ourselves in the process of life. But there's nothing wrong with having faith in God or a higher power. If we do that and we have a little bit of faith, just as humanity, we're going to come out of that period at some point, and something, like the book tells you, will come and will fill the void. And yes, your reality will be different, and it may not be all roses, it may not be all positive, but there is something else coming that you will find useful, that you will find important, and that will lead you on in the rest of your path in life until you reach another liminal moment, or until you reach another transitionary period, so to speak, and you keep going from there. It's not always a massive change, but change is going to keep happening whether we like it or not. And that's hard for me to say because I am stereotypically autistic in that I am not big on change. So I just wanted to share that. I hope something about what I've shared touches you and you find it useful to think about.